I'm a former senior coroner's officer. I've been investigating deaths for almost 20 years. And I want to talk a little bit about my experience and a couple of cases that I've looked at. So a little bit about me. This was taken just over 20 years ago. Before I became a coroner's officer, I had an academic background. So forensic science, forensic psychology, more recently forensic medicine, and I'm currently working on a doctorate on manner of death determination in equivocal deaths and stage crime scenes. I've also spent a little bit of time in America, shadowing NYPD, going to murder scenes, learning all about blood spatter analysis. And just a few years ago, I also learnt about stage crime scenes, psychological autopsy investigation, and advanced homicide investigation. So the type of training you can't get in the UK. And then in February 20 years ago, it will have been the first time I became a coroner's officer. So I first worked for Thames Valley Police, attending scenes and being on call and doing my own inquest files. And then I joined Cheshire Police. So this is me with a Cheshire Police officer. And I was with them for many years. And prior to 5 years ago, I absolutely loved working for them. I was really proud to work for them. And more recently, people know that I've spoken out about the Lucy Letby case. And I will talk about my involvement in Operation Hummingbird in a few moments. But before I do that, I want to talk about a couple of cases that happened in the 90s in Wilmslow, Cheshire. And it was my review of these cases that then led to the end of my career. So these were elderly couples. It was 3 years apart, 1996 and 1999, and they have a few common factors. So the cases were closed as murder-suicides, where the males had murdered their wives very violently and then killed themselves. So the first case, the police investigation was a short investigation, and it was concluded very quickly it was murder-suicide. The second case was actually started as a double murder investigation. So that was a much more detailed investigation. So the police, I think, did take a lot of care over that case. My predecessor raised concerns of me shortly after I joined the coroner's office, because she knew about my background in bloodstain pattern analysis and forensic science. And she said, one day, Steph, would you mind looking at these cases? Because there's something about them that's not right. And I thought for the first case that it would be, yes, some mistakes may have been made. It was so short, a lot of corners were cut. For the second case, I thought I'd end up agreeing with the police. And that's what I was expecting to feed back to my predecessor. So essentially, these are elderly couples who are found on the marital bed, males on the left, females on the right. Really quite horrific injuries. I don't like describing people as evil. I know some murderers or those that are accused of murder are called evil. I don't like saying that, but at these scenes, I could see evil. And I've seen many scenes. I've investigated hundreds of suicides. But what I saw at both of those scenes, I would describe as evil. So, like I said before, the theory was that the males had murdered their wives violently and then killed themselves. So I looked at the crime scene photographs, and I spotted a number of red flags for both cases. So the bloodstain distribution was the biggest thing for me. So for both cases, both of the males, the bloodstain patterns showed that the males were actually lying on the bed when their wives were murdered. So they couldn't have killed their wives. The males had sustained injuries that I did not think were consistent with suicide. Sometimes it can happen, but what I was seeing was not consistent for both of the cases. There's also evidence in the photographs that the males' bodies had been moved after death. So hands being trapped underneath the body and positioning where it was obvious they died first and then been moved onto their back. So the bodies have been posed on the beds. There are also signs of staging present at these scenes. Now, staging refers to when an offender thinks that they're going to be an obvious suspect. So what they do is they manipulate the scene, they change things, they change the movements of the bodies, they put artifacts down to change the narrative, to make it look like a different sequence of events happened. And so, in my opinion, an offender has staged these scenes and successfully fooled the police. There was also what the FBI term as signature behaviour at these scenes. Now, you would have heard of MO, so method of operation, where you commission a crime and get away with it. But signature behaviour is feeding a psychological need, and that was clear for both of these cases. So signs such as the women's night dresses were folded up, and they were exposed in their genitalia, so a form of humiliation. There was also, it was clear to me that the bodies had been repositioned after death, and the women's left hand were resting on their torso in exactly the same position with their wedding ring on show. So I think that was a message. And there are other signs as well, the types of wounds, and I won't go into that detail. I don't think it's there on the deceased if I go through those details in this public forum. But the wound typology also said a lot about the offender, in my opinion. So what did I do then? I had concerns. So I decided, I thought if there was just one case, a one-off double murder, I was not going to act on it. I was going to say to my predecessor, I agree with you for the first case, but not the second. I'm not going to take it any further forward. But when I saw patterns in both, and then I started to look for other potentially linked cases, and I found a few more in the Northwest. So I thought, this could be a serial offender. I've got a duty to speak out to my police force that they may have missed a serial murderer. So I raised concerns with my police force in 2018. I submitted a formal report. That was never read, or at least I was told it was never read. They were too busy. They could have been too busy with Operation Hummingbird, to be fair. That's another story. But I never got feedback. And then after 6 months of waiting, I then said to Cheshire Police, I'm going to fly to America. I'm going to do a course in staged crime scenes. I'm going to talk to experts. Can I please update my report and resubmit it? So I got told, yes, that's fine. And that's what I did. So I flew out to America. I spoke to experts in bloodstain pattern analysis and staged crime scenes. And to quote Dowie Evans, it took them literally less than 10 minutes looking at these photographs to see that they did look to be double murders. There were signs of staging, the blood patterns were wrong, the males were not the murderers, they were also murder victims. So I then worked on an updated report. We had COVID, so I was really busy supporting the force and the coroner with all the COVID deaths and putting plans into action. So it's June 2020 when I finished my updated review. And then I handed that to other experts for peer review before I submitted it back to the police. And it was one of those experts who then leaked it to the Sunday Times without my knowledge or permission. And that then led to a media frenzy over 5 years ago, in August 2020. And I found myself being on the front page of the Sunday Times. This report I'd written, I said that there was a serial killer, and it was an absolute frenzy. I was asked to do interviews, I was asked to do documentaries, write a book, and I had to say no to all of that because I was still working for Cheshire Police. That was the first time I felt anxiety. It's horrible, and I'd had depression in the past, I'd had some mental health vulnerabilities, but to feel anxiety as well, to feel that fear, that's something you've done, has then done this. And Cheshire Police announced it was a critical incident. And even though they said before this article, Steph, your job is safe, we're going to put it down to professional learning that you've reached out to experts and then it's been leaked. But as soon as this article happened, I was then told I was put under formal investigation. So what happened after that then? So my original concerns were never addressed. I'm still waiting for feedback. It's been over 5 years. When am I going to get it? Probably never. I've had no feedback at all on my reports, even though I've kept saying I want feedback. If I'm wrong, I need to know why and how I'm wrong. I've also said there needs to be an independent review. There is a conflict of interest with Cheshire Police marking their own homework. Really needs to be an external body. And when I submitted my report in 2018, I said you need a panel of experts, different experts, to look at the original evidence, so before looking at my report, so there's no bias introduced. And they decided to target me instead. So my house was searched, personal property, even personal property that was not covered by the search warrant was taken. I was subjected to interviews under caution. My private personal diaries were read out to me, whilst I was having to say no comment to all these questions, even though I wanted to speak, but my solicitor said, say no comment, don't say anything. So I felt like I had no choice. And they even threatened to read out all of my diary entries. And I was thinking, what's this got to do with the report I wrote on the Wilmslow cases? Why are they trying to make me feel so rubbish? And they even inferred that I must not have been very rational when I wrote my reports because of what I've written in my personal private diary. Now, I was born deaf. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 4 years old. I wear hearing aids. So I'm used to being very introspective. It's not normal for me to reach out and talk to people. So one way of getting thoughts out was in my private diary. So I felt psychologically raped when they went through all my personal things. And all this time, I'm still waiting, for feedback on my concerns. I believe that the whole force were under instruction to not talk to me. Even the coroners were told they're not allowed to talk to me. So I was suspended, and I was facing disciplinary, I was facing criminal charges. Cheshire Police tried to get me charged with data protection breaches and misconduct, gross misconduct in public office. The CPS said no. Cheshire Police then appealed that decision. The CPS said no again. And then I finally found out that I wasn't going to be charged. And then there was a disciplinary held in my absence. They wouldn't let my lawyer go. They wouldn't give me disclosure of all the evidence that they'd found. And they then wrote a letter to me saying, we would have sacked you had you not resigned. And we're now placing you on the College of Policing barred list. So I'd been truthful all the way through. So a bit like Lucy, she'd been truthful, thought I'll cooperate with the police. All I've ever done is tell the truth. And I lost my job. So now talking about the Lucy Letby case, I think a few of you or most of you are familiar with this part of my life. So I was asked by Cheshire Police to review the case or review the spike in neonatal deaths in May 2017. There was a letter received by the Countess of Chester to Cheshire Police, and 2 days later I was asked to go to a Gold Group meeting. So I was asked by the Assistant Chief Constable to review all of the deaths between, it was June 2015 and June, or the end of June 2016. So review all of those, look at the cause of deaths, and then report the next morning, are these deaths explained? So they did not ask me to look for deliberate harm, they just said, are these deaths explained? So I went back to the office, had less than 3 hours to do the review before I was going to be kicked out of the building. I found there were 13 deaths. So 2015 there were 8, and 2016 there were 5. 4 of those deaths were what the coroner refers to as Part A, Form A deaths, All that means is that the doctor had a discussion with the coroner's officer and the coroner authorised for that doctor to issue a medical cause of death certificate. So there's no further investigation from the coroner's point of view. 5 had paediatric post-mortem examinations. Paediatric pathologists are incredibly detailed. We do get hospital pathologists and you get forensic pathologists, but paediatric pathologists are on almost the same level as forensic. They are incredibly detailed. The post-mortem reports can be 15 to 20 pages long. So these are very, very detailed, and this is what I spent most of my time looking at, these post-mortem reports. The cause of death did come back as natural causes, or for some of them, prematurity. 2 were subjected to inquests, so 1 had been heard, that was baby A, and the other one that was due to be heard later on in May, that was baby D, I believe. That was adjourned because of Operation Hummingbird. And then 2 were pending the coroner's final decision, and those were for babies O and P. I was going to come back and say the natural causes, they're explained, there's no common theme. I don't think we can go further with this. But it was a couple of post-mortem reports that gave me cause for concern, and especially for baby O, where the pathologist in his comments, he was saying a sequence of events, but there seems to be a gap. He's like, I can't figure out what's happened, how A caused B. There's something missing. And then I'm sure I saw that in another post-mortem report, but I'm going back 8 years now, so it was quite a long time ago. And I thought, there's missing information here. So the next morning, I said to Cheshire Police at this Gold Group meeting, I said, the cause of deaths are mostly natural, but there appears to be missing jigsaw pieces. There are gaps, and I don't know what those gaps are. It seems like if the hospital are now saying that they've got new information or new evidence, that may then alter the causes of death. So it may be that you need to look further into this. Now, I was expecting Cheshire Police to then consult with those original paediatric pathologists and then get a team of experts. That's what I was expecting. Now, I had no further involvement with Operation Hummingbird after I did my review. I was completely sidelined. The coroner was sidelined. It was now a police investigation, nothing to do with the coroner. It was now the police, so we had to keep out of it. But it was only after my employment ended that I started to see some more red flags. And I thought this was, because of the detail, the long investigation, I thought this must be a genuine murder or multiple murder case. The first thing was the so-called confession notes. And this was during the first trial, and it was all like a big, wow, yes, she's definitely done it. Look, she said she's evil, she's done it. And I thought, no, that's subjective behavioural evidence. That's not tangible forensic evidence, in my opinion. And then there are other notes saying that she was innocent, so it's like there's conflict there. So how can they be so sure that this is a genuine confession? She's under investigation, she's traumatised. So that can explain it. When my report about the Wilmslow cases was leaked, I felt guilty. I felt like I had done something wrong. I don't now. I believe I did the right thing. But then I felt incredibly guilty, and I thought I'm the worst person in the world. I've let down my police force. So this I found concerning. I also found it really concerning how a retired paediatrician was actually allowed to change not only the cause of death for some of these babies, but the manner of death. The manner of death needs to be determined by a coroner, not a retired paediatrician. And there was evidence that there was confirmation bias in several forms. So in the hospital, with the principal accusers, they were allowed to have quite a lead role in the investigation. Within the police, now seeing confirmation bias already, in the Wilmslow cases, seeing it again in this case. And even through the media as well, the way they described Lucy, there was bias there as well. And then later on, it became apparent that there was a refusal to consider these alternative explanations. And what we've been seeing is doubling down when being criticised. Doubling down in the hospital, doubling down in the police. The police also doubled down with the Wilmslow cases. So what happened with these two cases then? In my view, the science has been misinterpreted. Behaviour has been misinterpreted. Assumptions have been made. Oh, she came across her with no emotion in court. Well, she may have been medicated. She may have been traumatised. I was heavily medicated after the Wilmslow report had been leaked. I was in such a state. And so when I was interviewed, I was a little bit without emotion. Missing those red flags, those little warning signs along the way. Did nobody stop to think, something's not right here? Did nobody stop to think that? Failing to consider the alternative. So in medicine, it's differential diagnoses. What are the alternatives? Could there be other explanations? That lack of professional curiosity. In the adversarial policing system, it's either there's a crime or there's no crime, and then you make the evidence fit. With coroners and inquisitorial investigations, you're trying to establish what happened. So you're trying to seek the truth, so you have that professional curiosity. The inappropriate appointments of experts. There really needed to be a multidisciplinary panel, in my opinion, for Operation Hummingbird. And I did say to Cheshire Police for the Wilmslow cases as well, it's needed. But that was ignored. Not being inquisitorial, seeking the truth is vital, not seeking results. And there is a fundamental lack in the UK of staged crime scenes and equivocal deaths. UK police officers are not being taught about it. There's no literature on the topic, and I know that because I've done a literature review for my doctorate. And common theme, confirmation bias. We can't get away from it, but we need to minimise it. So the next steps, I think there needs to be an independent inquiry into both the Wilmslow cases and the Lucy Letby case. Now, who's the best person to do that? I don't know, because I don't have much faith, if I'm honest. But those cases need to be taken off Cheshire Police, in my opinion. Complex death investigations, they need to be inquisitorial. If it's 100% adversarial, then it's one side against the other. It's about making the evidence fit, and it's whichever side performs the best in court. And it shouldn't be like that. And organisations, they need to acknowledge when they've made mistakes. That includes hospitals and police forces. So that's pretty much the end of my talk. I hope I didn't go over my allotted time. I have done a website. It's a little bit more about me, about my experience and some other cases I've reviewed. And you can contact me by email as well. And that's the end. Thank you all so much. Okay, thank you.